8 bold predictions. We're going screen share style on this one. Going to spend about a minute and a half, give or take, on each of these. And I'll admit, a lot of the time, bold predictions are not bold enough for me. I really think that you got to be in this 10 to 15% window with them. So that means if I get one of these correct, I will consider this a win. This isn't necessarily to go 8 for 8. It's to have some cool discussions around more advanced things happening in the sport and try to surprise some of you with how grimy some of the teams are that I'm going to throw bold predictions on. And if you stick around to the end, I'll have a call to action that I want you, the viewer, to participate in. So let's do this. Number 1, there will be a playoff game hosted at a AAA stadium this season. This, of course, implies that either the Rays or the Athletics not only make the playoffs, but host a playoff game this season. And it's more a bet on the Athletics, I think, overall. Relative to the market and where I see projections, I think they are a better team. But I think there's variance in both of these parks, right? I know a lot of projections are probably looking at these parks and trying to estimate what's going on, but that's going to be hard to do given both these parks did not have major league talent playing there for a full sample where we can confidently say this park plays as so. You look at last year's park factors. These are rolling 3-year park factors, I believe. The Rays and the Athletics are both bottom 4. These parks played pitcher-friendly relative to the league. And I think Steinbrenner Field and Sacramento are both going to play top 10 now, which just creates a lot of variance. And I think both those situations that could create, I don't want to say inaccuracy, but more of a range of outcomes around the projections here. The Athletics are right around 71.5 wins per sportsbooks that I saw, which is about a 52% chance they go over on that. To make the playoffs, so they're 10.5%. The Rays are about at 81.5. And again, juice to the over slightly with a 36% chance. So if you do like an or on those probabilities, you're going to get to somewhere around probably 40%. So, I'm looking at 10% as my barrier. I think this is probably the one that has a shot to hit. And I like it overall. We can see Fangraphs has 82 wins on the Rays, and they like the Athletics a bit more, putting them at 86 wins, I believe, right? Or 76, right there. First off, the Athletics are, I think, a much better team than the Angels, so we'll see how that pans out. The Rays rotation is fun. Shane McClanahan off Tommy John. Littell has been this crazy project they've done a good job with. Joe Boyle added a sinker that has crazy amount of drop I think will work this season. I'm somewhat confident it will. As to whether he'll throw strikes, nobody knows, but I guess we'll find out together. On the projection side with the Athletics, their bats are interesting and also super young. Brent Rooker's the old man at 30, but everyone else here, between J.J. Bleday down to Jacob Wilson, these 5 hitters are all under the age of 28, so assume some improvement in plate skills and everything, and they're projected right in this 100 to 100 WRC plus window. I'm going to say 2 to 3 of these guys outperform that WRC interval and do really well. So the Athletics or the Rays making the playoffs and hosting a playoff game. Maybe not too bold, but it's one of my favorites. Number 2, the Marlins will have a top 5 team ERA or fielder independent pitching this season. Now, this one is a pure bet on the staff they brought in. They turned over a ton of people at the top level from the pitching side, brought in a bunch of analytics folks. Bill Hazel's new director of pitching there, new pitching coach, new assistant pitching coach. Their bullpen coach is a sharp guy. A lot of people there who I'm pretty confident align with more modern philosophies in terms of pushing stuff, pushing velocity, optimizing usage, etc. I think that's going to have a huge impact on this organization. It also helps to get Sandy Alcantara back. I totally understand that. They had a 4.75 team ERA last year. 4.44 FIP was bottom 5 in baseball. This is going to be a dramatic improvement if it happens. We can look at their projections. Sandy Alcantara at 3 wins above replacement definitely helps. Everyone else in that 1-1, 3-ish window. My bets here are on Weathers, Cabrera, and Max Meyer, and wouldn't you know, this gets even bolder because just as I was about to record this video, I saw that Ryan Weathers is going to miss some time with a forearm injury. Not particularly great. Doesn't help the bold prediction much because I really like what they did with Ryan Weathers. But just to prove out what I'm talking about here, the reason I like this is because how it's being projected, I don't think is going to capture how it will go. And that's what I'm looking for in a lot of these bold predictions. With these guys, to prove how competent I think this staff is from a pitching standpoint, I'm going to show you some plots here, just year over year. With Weathers, again, down with injury. Let's assume that he maybe can get to like 120, 130 innings this year, and this is not as bad as it seems, although forearm is sometimes indicative of future Tommy John stuff. But I don't want to speculate on that. More fastball ride, harder velo, more changeup drop. He added in right here a gyro slider. So this is on your right spring, and this is last year. Not throwing as much sinker. Okay, subtle improvements there, but some that I think are important. Edward Cabrera, another one, right? We're not going to look totally at usage yet, but tweak this slider. You see how that's a little bit more left, and the curveball in terms of how it's working is much more down. Just these subtle tweaks are things that I think matter overall. Max Meyer, probably one of the biggest overhauls. Basically didn't throw a sinker last year on your left, and then those brown dots are sinkers. He has a new sweeper. I love his slider. These subtle adjustments capture value, and I think that will vault the Marlins forward. I just need him to stay healthy. Perhaps, with these guys that come in, these sharper guys that come in and try to overhaul teams, I do think maybe you run into a bit of risk. My fear here is that as maybe they blow out some guys get hurt as they try to shake things up, I don't want the organization to get loss averse. That is probably a key thing I'm thinking of here. So just let it go, because I think over time this team will get a lot better, and I think it'll start this year. Number 3, the Rockies throw a bottom 5% of fastballs. That's going to be combined four-seam and sinker usage. Nowhere in baseball are pitches more affected than Coors Field. And as a result of that, I would expect the Rockies to not throw a lot of fastballs, but we've seen them historically hang middle or above the pack in terms of usage of these pitches, despite the fact that Coors contracts all this movement. You could see last year they were 16th in baseball, which is more average, but the prior 2 they were top 10, which is nuts. I expanded on this very topic, how do you succeed as a pitcher at Coors Field, for Stark Raving Sports, which is a place I will be occasionally contributing. And I encourage you to check out their channel and the video I did called How to Survive Pitching at Coors Field. I'm going to link to it in the video description. It digs more into this bold prediction idea. But again, we're going to have to look at something like a 4 to 5 percentage point cut off the 48-ish% or so that they used four-seam and sink last year. That would put them in the sharper orgs in baseball. And nowhere in baseball should they be doing this more than Coors Field. Number 4, Paul Skeens wins the National League MVP. I know it's been grimy in terms of the teams I'm hitting on, and there's another grimy team I'm going to hit on after this one, but I got to give you something juicy here. I love Paul Skeens. I think he's a very good pitcher overall. He's got 2 new pitches this year, and that cutter, which is more of a straight gyro slider, and he's throwing like a true 2-seam fastball. These don't necessarily show up in some of the spring data we have for him, although it's maybe just perhaps misclassification here overall. But I'm curious to see how they play, and I think as you add wrinkles to a pitcher like this to stave off any kind of league comfortability, that is a huge moment, and I think it will help him a lot. This is bold. This is probably one of the more bold, because per sportsbook, you're looking at a 1 to 2% chance of him doing this. 66 to 1, 55 to 1, 65 to 1. That's like between 1 and 2% in terms of probability. It's pretty out there, but I like it, because I think that he's a very good pitcher, and I think he's got a shot to do a couple things. He's currently projected for about 5.3 WAR. I need him probably to go over 200 innings, sub 2.5 ERA, and I'm going to need him to jump the strikeout rate, kill the walk rate. I'm going to need him to do a lot. Let me jump over to his projections quickly and just point out what I'm talking about here, right? So 5.3 WAR, 12-6, one of the strongest K per 9s. Everything has got to fall in my direction here. He probably needs to get win lucky. It's going to be hard. You look at last year in terms of just batting leaders, in terms of the WAR they put up. You have like a couple guys, thankfully, in the ALs. Partially my bet here is Ohtani maybe compresses his WAR a bit by pitching 9.1. So I need Skeens to almost double his performance, which is going to be pretty difficult. But again, that's why it's bold. I think those additions of the new pitches are going to help. I think he's a great pitcher. This is going to be his year. Number 5, the Chicago White Sox are a top 5 pitch framing team in Major League Baseball. This is bold, obviously, because it's the White Sox, but I have a reason here that I think is pretty important. We can look 2024, this is framing runs as a team, 3rd worst. 23 and 22, they were pretty good, partially because of Yasmani Grandal. So the point here is that one guy could really influence his staff and shoot that organization up. The thing with the White Sox, though, is that they didn't really have great catchers last year. Corey Lee, -7, one of the worst in baseball, above like close to 3,000 pitches seen. Maldonado's not going to be there anymore, but the guy they brought in to back him up is Matt Thaiss, who was also pretty terrible. The reason that I love this one is that there's a guy named Walter McKinven who has been hired as the White Sox bench coach. He was previously with the Brewers, where he worked as like their run prevention coordinator, but this guy's the catching whisperer. If you ask people in the organization why have they been able to turn negative catchers like Wilson Contreras and Omar Narvaez into reputable framers, it's this guy. And he comes to the White Sox. He's got Kyle Teel on the back burner, who's already had some reps in the high minors, who I think is good. To prove out with McKinven as well, I saw this on Foolish Bailey's video where he talks about the Brewers catching lab must be stopped. And he mentions Walker McKinven here. But Brewers framing runs added since they started tracking that statistic in 2008. You can see I'm going to zoom in on it. But the Brewers are light years above the Braves in terms of the most. McKinven hadn't been there that long, but he has an impact. My bet here is that he makes Corey Lee a better catcher. a better framer, maybe average, then Kyle Teal comes up, who's already a good blocker and thrower, and becomes a plus framer. And the White Sox have something to cheer about this year. Number 6, Garrett Crochet has the highest strikeout rate in the last 10 seasons. I'll qualify this and say that it has to be a pitcher with over 2,000 pitches thrown in that given season. But this is a extremely high bar to clear. This is going to be a massive jump for Garrett Crochet. Since 2015, I looked at this. The strikeout rate in a single season that was the highest was 2019 Garrett Cole. This is our sort here, right? So he's got to break 40%, which is an insane jump. If you look at projections in terms of where he is right now, he is way up there at 32% next to DeGrom and Strider. The rest above are relievers. So we're looking at, a really big jump here. We almost need him to jump like a third up in this statistic. The reason I like this one is that the Red Sox threw the lowest amount of four-seam and sinker last year, probably in the history of the sport. And this year they're going to jump back up because they have Buehler and Giolito and Crochet, but they're going to apply their touch to these guys. If you look at Crochet versus right-handed hitters in particular, his four-seam and cutter split. So how often did he throw those two pitches? Second half last year when he started to lock in and kind of pull down his innings, he was 52% four-seam, 33% cutter. This year in spring training, the four-seam is down to 40%. Massive. It's a small sample. I'm not going to overreact to this, but this is huge. Four-seam, I'm down to 35. I'm undershooting it. 35% on the four-seam, 42% on the cutter. So he pulled down the four-seam. He's throwing a lot more sinker to righties. He's going to be a monster. And I think that four-seam is very good, but it doesn't need to be thrown in that 45-50% window. And this is going to inflate his strikeout rate. I'm just forcing it to be inflated by a lot in order to make this a truly bold prediction. But obviously, you see I like good pitchers. Paul Skeens, Garrett Crochet are going to have amazing years. Number 7, the average number of pitches that a starting pitcher throws this season will jump over 5 for the first time, and I'm going to say it eclipses 5.1, which would be the biggest jump year over year, probably since 2018, and we could even say earlier than that. This is something I've hit on in a bunch of my other videos. I think this is the year of the mix, and I got to put it in one of my bold predictions here, that not only does it jump up, that it shoots up and really, really eclipses things. We're going to have to throw some parameters on this. In the past, when I've looked at this, I'm looking basically at the top 180 starting pitchers in terms of innings in Major League Baseball. Minimum 1,300 pitchers or so, and you have to throw the pitch about 50 times in order to get there. The average guy is about 4.8, but that is the number that it's gotten to, right? It's right around that window right now. You look historically, it's always hung between about 4.3 and 4.5. You see some downtick. And then you see since 22 to 23, we saw a big jump. 23 to 24, we saw a big jump. So my bet is that this accelerates and gets way up here to 5.1 and then probably plateaus off over the next few seasons. But I really like this. I did another video on this. Here's why every pitcher needs more pitches. Talked about how minor league depth matters and works. And you see some actually sharper teams are not doing this. Maybe they're just polishing off repertoires at the major league level. But the 3 fastball approach is becoming really in vogue. Four-seam, sink, cut. And I think that's really going to take over here. And this will be the year that we see mixes really start to dominate. Just the diversity of pitches, the realization that four-seam fastballs allow a lot of damage and trying to mitigate the risk of giving up barrels. Number 8, my last one, another zoomed out league level one here. We're going to have the worst slash line in terms of offensive production that we've had in the last 17 seasons. And this is bold because of another bold prediction I had where we're talking about the Rays Stadium in Florida and Sacramento both playing above average. So imagine removing those from the equation, what the rest of the league needs to do from an offensive production standpoint, how bad they need to be in order for this to hit. Under 240 batting average, under 305 OBP. You probably need under a 395 slug to actually get this to work. Here are those slash lines for the last 17 years or so, right? 243 batting average was the lowest. 22 is pretty comparable. The slug has really ticked down. So 22 and 24 are pretty comparable. We had a bit of an uptick in 23. I'm expecting 23 to be a blip, and now we get a drop back down overall. The pitchers are too good. The kick change is unbelievable. Guys are adding things like crazy, partially connected to my other one about the mix overall. I'm just expecting it to be a very pitching-dominated environment this season, and then we're going to drum up a lot of interest around what do we do to get offensive back. And pitchers are just, in reality, too good. So that's what I got for you this year. My call to action is simple. I want your bold prediction, and you got to actually make it bold. I need to be surprised in the comments when I head down there and see what you got for me. I enjoyed a bit of audience participation here in my breakout starting pitchers video. It seems like everyone who follows my channel loves the Giants. I had so much Led and Rupp and Birdsong and all these other guys that I really wasn't thinking of as breakouts, but I should have maybe made a bold prediction on the Giants rotation based on how many people like Birdsong and some of these other arms they have. But that's besides the point. You can make a Giants bold prediction if you want. Does not matter to me. But I want bold predictions, and I want it in the comments, and I'll react to them, which will be fun. So thanks as always for watching. enjoy the start of the Major League Baseball season. This will be my last video before opening day, and then we'll get going on some other stuff.